Hey girl, Marissa here. You are listening to the Codependent Dummy podcast. As a young woman, you have been raised, reinforced, and rewarded for putting the needs of others above your own. Now, in your 20s, you're finding yourself exhausted, exasperated, and enveloped in shit relationships, especially the one you have with yourself. Codependency is a way of being where we put the feelings, wants, and needs of others above our own in an unconscious attempt to meet our own feelings, wants, and needs. Sorry to break it to you, sis, but that is not sustainable. This podcast is to help you undo all that so you can stop playing small and start taking up space, you dummy. Let's get to it. All right, today we have Rachel Koutnik, LCSW. She is a holistic therapist in private practice in Los Angeles, California. She works with teens, adults, and couples. Rachel integrates approaches that treat the mind, body, and spirit, and works with issues such as anxiety disorders, trauma, relationship issues, self-compassion, and what we're going to discuss today, Body Dysmorphic Disorder. Thank you for coming on, Rachel.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
All right. It's no mystery. It's the first question I ask everybody.
Yes.
How do you define codependency?
I was thinking about this one. So for me, there's a couple different definitions. When I think of codependency, the first thing that comes to my mind is the person that's trying to be a caretaker, the person that puts somebody else's needs before their own. And it becomes a long-term cycle. And over time, that person almost disappears. It really becomes about the other and less about the other person's needs. And so you get in this cycle of giving, but not really receiving. So that's the main thing that I think of with codependency. The other definition that I came across that I thought was interesting in relation to body dysmorphic disorder is when a person is controlled or manipulated by another person who's the more dependent one. So somebody that's dependent on alcohol or a drug. The person that's caretaking can be also controlled or manipulated by that person, not always consciously. And in a way, BDD, when you have BDD is like that alcohol or like that drug. And somebody can actually be manipulated by their own BDD, and others can be manipulated by that part of somebody that has body dysmorphic disorder. But it's not as obvious as somebody who's an alcoholic or somebody who is doing drugs. The person with BDD is buying too many products for their face or their body, is looking for procedures, going to lots of doctors, asking for reassurance about their appearance. And so it comes off as almost socially acceptable behavior. But for the person with body dysmorphic disorder, these are unwanted thoughts. This is not vanity. This is not, tell me I look good, tell me I look good. It's it's sort of those obsessions and compulsions that the other person can get caught up in with you, and you can get caught up with them within yourself, if that makes sense.
It will make more sense
in
a moment, everyone. So everyone just hang on. We're gonna get Rachel's definition of BDD and all the symptoms, which we're hearing hints of. And going back to, I really appreciate two definitions that you gave. One, a caretaker. And I love your language, cycle.
Yeah.
Someone disappears.
Yeah.
And potentially, being codependent, we could be taking care of, giving to someone who does control and manipulate us.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah.
Did you want to add?
I just think of codependency when it's just such a loss of self. When you talk about giving, and as we talk more, I'll get more clear on, there can be a loss of self in giving to the other, which is that typical codependency definition, but there can also be a loss of self in getting lost within your own BDD symptoms. So that's kind of what struck me when I was thinking of codependency.
A loss of self. Usually in someone or lots of someone's.
Yes. Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, well, can you share with myself and the listeners any experiences you've had with codependency?
Yeah. So I myself have a diagnosis of body dysmorphic disorder, which is why I'm so passionate about this topic in particular. And I've been struggling with BDD for over 20 years now. I think back, when I think of codependency, I think back to the beginning stages when I didn't even know that I had body dysmorphic disorder. And I would definitely say now with perspective that I was in a totally codependent relationship with my mother. That's the one that strikes me the most. And in that relationship, I was the one that was more dependent, and she was more the codependent person who was enabling my illness. And I didn't even know it. And so things like, at the time I thought I needed to go see 1 million doctors, and I needed all of these products, and I needed procedures to remove my body hair. And then after that, I needed a checkup with a plastic surgeon. And it was just so much. And my mother, in her own way, enabled and not understanding, and paid for the doctors and sent me for more consults. And it was a very toxic relationship, because with BDD, even if you go and you get a procedure, you get something, it's a temporary fix, or it just exacerbates or makes your symptoms worse. So it's different from someone who legitimately has something going on and they see a dermatologist, or they see someone and they feel better. Somebody with BDD is going to be seeking to feel better by changing their appearance, but what they're seeing is already distorted in some way. So looking back, there was just a long-term codependent relationship, definitely with my mother. I also think of codependency in romantic relationships, and often there can be a loss of self or a lot of shame around the BDD, and that being so private that you want to appear like you're this amazing person all the time and be very giving towards somebody else and their needs. And so I definitely had portions of my life where, my romantic partners had no idea what I was going through. And I would try to appear high functioning or higher functioning than I was, and also be very pleasing to, what does this person want from me or need from me, or how do I not be upsetting, and just very codependent patterns in both perspectives, both me being the one that was ill and then also sacrificing my needs for somebody else.
Like daughter, like mother.
Yeah, the things we learn and then repeat in our lives. Yeah, it's been an interesting journey, becoming more aware of my own patterns, and then also shifting to becoming a therapist, and then really learning about some of these psychological disorders, and also seeing others on their journeys and helping them through their own struggles. It's interesting being a therapist and looking back, I see it so clearly now. Like it's so obvious, but at the time it's really not obvious. It's just where you're at. So I can really empathize with a lot of my clients and their struggles.
Right. And at the time, this is a two-part question. What would you have labeled your relationship with your mom, and what would you have labeled your relationship with former romances, right? You're like, codependent? No.
Oh yeah,
we're
never.
We're what? We're.
It's just it's almost just normal. It's just what you are. Yeah, we're just totally normal. We just, approach each other when it's like I have a need and I'm asking in an unhealthy way, but at the time that's just the way that it was. There wasn't any other way that I knew. And so, yeah, it was totally normal. And even at the beginning stages of different relationships, it's, you just hide parts of yourself, and, you just want to be liked and have everything go well. And it's just that's not humaning. It's not realistic. Mm-hmm. And it's not until you have other experiences in your life and that you can see what the other options are. If what you know is all you know, it's not even like having blinders on. You just don't know any better.
Right. I talk about that in the intro. Like, codependency is a way of being.
Yeah.
It's not, it may be to a more intense degree in certain relationships, but I was codependent. I've said this time and time again, but with baristas, gym instructors, I wanted to be like the best student and like pay attention so they didn't feel bad about all the other distracted people. And so it's a way of being, and we're reinforced, rewarded, and oh God, I forget the first R. I can't remember. Sorry, everybody. Yeah. And but it's modeled.
Yeah.
And if we don't, we have blinders on. How is there? Yeah. There's other ways to function in the world.
Well, and I think of a child,
raised. You helped me.
Raised. There you go. See, we're on the same wavelength. But I do. I think of a child, and any attention is good attention when you're a child. And it's not in reality, but a child will get attention however that child needs to get attention. It's survival. Mm-hmm. And so throwing a tantrum and screaming for hours is one way, and then being really pleasing and, smiling and laughing and getting attention, that's another way. And whichever one will get you attention, and everything in between, you take it. And, I definitely look back, in times that I was not well, I got attention. Mm-hmm. And that became like a cyclical pattern of staying unwell, because that's where I could get attention, and it became so normal. And I see a lot of clients in that struggle as well, where they don't want to be suffering, but suffering becomes so familiar, and other people reinforce it around you, you reinforce it within yourself. And it's not until you really learn that there are so many other ways of being, and how to bring yourself back to the healthier ways. It's a lot of unlearning and relearning new patterns.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've been hinting. Rachel, what is body dysmorphic disorder?
Oh, yes. Lots of layers with this question. The clinical definition with body dysmorphic disorder is when you have a minor flaw, so something that is maybe noticeable, but just pretty small to everybody else, or a perceived flaw. So maybe something on your physical appearance that you think is really wrong with you, but no one else even really notices it at all.
For example?
So for example, your nose, you might think is horribly crooked and misshapen. You ask somebody and they say, like, maybe it's a little, like, not super straight, but I would have never noticed. I would have never looked at your face and said that your nose is misshapen. But when you look in the mirror, that's all you see. Mm-hmm. And it's impossible for you to understand that other people don't see how hideous and ugly you are. And it's almost scary looking. It's misshapen. It's, it's not symmetrical. It throws my whole face off. And so there's so much focus on this minor flaw or flaw that other people wouldn't even notice is there, but you see it as a flaw. Usually with BDD, there are obsessions and compulsions and rituals around camouflaging, hiding, checking this perceived flaw or this minor flaw. Things like mirror checking. So going to the mirror, spending a lot of time looking at it. Is it there? Is it not there? Trying to fix it with makeup, trying to hide it or camouflage with a hat or a scarf or earrings or your hair or gel, or do spending so much time trying to make yourself appear. Typically it's less ugly. It's like, how do I appear normal looking? Most people with BDD don't want to look like a celebrity or this, or they just want to look normal. They don't feel normal. They feel hideous. They feel ugly, and these flaws or flaw on their body, they become really hyper-focused on that particular flaw that they perceive is something like a deformity. Usually the person with body dysmorphic disorder doesn't always realize that what they're seeing is distorted. And so part of the illness is the person can be on a spectrum of being aware that they're having thoughts, and what they see is maybe not how other people see them. Like, I think I'm seeing myself really poorly, and I don't think I look great today, but other people tell me I look fine, so maybe I actually look fine, versus total delusion with your BDD, where other people will say you look amazing and you look in the mirror and you just see a monster, you see somebody hideous. There's no awareness that what other people see could be correct and what you're seeing might actually be wrong. And I definitely have been through all of those phases of completely being in delusion to gaining perspective of, oh my gosh, the way that I see myself might not be real, and it might not be how other people see me. And even if I have flaws, which I do, you know, everybody does, other people aren't judging you the way that you're judging yourself. And so the person with body dysmorphic disorder is hyper-focused, is having obsessions, is having rituals, often spending maybe three or more hours a day checking their appearance, spending time getting ready, touching their physical flaw throughout the day. So it might be their acne or their skin. It could be their hair. It could be body hair. It could be their muscles. A lot of men have muscle dysmorphia. Seeing themselves as skinny and not muscular enough when they look normal or average, but they're not relating to their body in the same way. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
And what are some contributing factors to BDD? We'll call it BDD for now, everybody. Yeah. BDD.
So this is the unfortunate part. There's not a ton of research on BDD. People are still trying to they're still doing more and more research, and the studies are changing as to what contributes to BDD, and also the supportive treatments for BDD are still changing and growing. But there are a lot of different factors. So there could be a genetic predisposition to mental illness in your family, and that can develop into these obsessions and hyper-focus on your appearance. What I notice and what I've seen as a trend with a lot of people with BDD is attachment struggles with their primary caregivers. And so usually with BDD, there are, there's usually a disconnect between you and your primary caregiver. Your caregiver wasn't able to nurture you or be there for you emotionally in the ways that you needed. And so that might be a narcissistic parent, that might be an alcoholic parent. You might have had childhood trauma of sexual abuse or physical abuse, emotional neglect. And often that lack of attachment gets focused inward. and the control. When you think of BDD, it's similar to OCD in some ways, where there are obsessions and compulsions and there's anxiety. So there's a need to control and have control over your physical appearance and a hyper focus on your physical appearance. And so
OCD is
OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder.
It's the codependent.
Yes.
Okay, so you're helping us. So similar to OCD, and then also, can you help just expand? In former shows, there's been mention of narcissistic parenting, alcoholism, different types of abuse. Dear listeners, we will continue to enlighten you on that. Not the focus today, but can you expand on what the fuck is an attachment issue? It sounds like something in an email.
It's a little bit like an email. It could get lost. It might attach, it might not attach. It might make it might not make it. But attachment, so when we think of attachment, it's our bonding towards somebody. And we learn our attachment from our primary caregivers as children. So if we had parents that were able to, if we're crying and they soothe us and they come over and they hold us and they hug us and they tell you, oh, I love you, I'm here for you, it's okay, and we feel safe again. But sometimes we can have parents who don't pick us up, who don't soothe us, who, are busy, who aren't even there. And we're left to cry on our own and we're not soothed. And we start to distrust our primary caregivers, and the world starts to feel really scary and our emotions feel really big. And so as we grow up and become adults, there are those different attachment styles. So secure is that healthy attachment where we're okay alone, we're not too dependent on other people, we understand we're separate from others, we can soothe ourselves, we can set boundaries, we can ask for what we need, and mostly our needs are met. We can ask for what we need and believe and trust that somebody can help meet those needs. And if they can't, we don't take it too personally. We can then go meet our needs somewhere else. So there's more of a secure attachment in that way. But a lot of people with BDD have either anxious attachment styles or avoidant attachment styles, where they don't trust that the other person is going to meet their needs, but they want their needs met. And so there can be overly attaching to somebody, reassurance seeking, being overly pleasing. But then we can also be avoidant, where we don't trust the person. We want to be close, but the closer somebody gets to you, it's like, I can't handle it. I don't know how to do this. It's uncomfortable. Even if it's healthy, it could be uncomfortable, and we could push people away.
Right. So what's familiar in bonding with our parents tends to be familiar in our relationships as children, adolescents, adults.
Yep.
So those with BDD, right? The research is sparse. Same for codependency. Yeah. And so there's just some theories, and they think potentially attachment struggles, right? Genetics,
attachment struggles, genetics. Those are the big ones that come across. The other one is bullying. A lot of people with body dysmorphic disorder have specific incidences where they either had a physical trauma or they had somebody or multiple people in different occasions pinpoint a body part, something on their physical appearance, make fun of it. The trauma, especially with kids these days. I mean, I didn't even have the internet or texting or anything. I can't even imagine, people taking pictures or spreading rumors about you, or, just any kind of trauma related to bullying, or somebody might even make a comment about your physical appearance that they didn't mean to bully you, but they made a comment about your physical appearance, maybe putting you down or making a joke, but the person with BDD might internalize that. And then we call it rumination, where you just think about it over and over and over, and it becomes a really big issue, and maybe the possible root cause or something that set off more of those obsessions about your appearance.
Got it.
Yeah.
All right, and now the bridge. Right, we've been on the codependency island, BDD island. How do BDD and codependency relate?
Yeah.
We'll start with that, and then we'll talk about how they don't
How they're
relate.
not. So the related part for me is a lot of times the person with BDD is really insecure. There's a lot of shame, there's a lot of insecurity, and there's a need to be loved, to be wanted, to be approved of, to be seen as beautiful and to be likable, whether it's friendships or a romantic partner. And there can be so much shame around the BDD that just gets like pushed to the side, and this overcompensation of how can I be lovable? How can I meet your needs so that you don't leave me can be the primary focus. And so there can be a codependency involved in making friends, in having romantic relationships, by putting the other before yourself.
Mm-hmm. And what about, Rachel, going back to bullying,
Mm-hmm.
right? If I guess this is a stretch, but if somebody is making fun of me and a part of my body, like I remember one time in high school, I have a couple, it's so interesting as you're talking, my grandma, she commented on my cheeks when I was little in Spanish. So she wanted it to be somewhat secretive, but she told my dad, like, whatever, however you say it in Spanish. And then my dad retorted, "She does not have big cheeks." And I was like, oh, Grandma. And then another memory of a high school friend who, male, long story short, he was talking to someone else about me, and they said, "Marissa," and he's like, "Oh, she has huge tits." And I was like, I'm like,
yeah. You're like, do I? Like, what? Yeah.
And so, right, being codependent, wanting that approval, attention, affection from others at all times, barista, grandma, this kid, Brian. How do you sense that contributes or is related to BDD, right? If I don't care what other people think, am I so mindful about this body part?
Mm-hmm. So this kind of is where it's like average person to where then maybe it crosses the line and you have BDD, because I think all of us on some level have had those experiences where, some people just kind of suck sometimes and make really mean comments. Our family members, our friends, or people that just making a joke that use us as the brunt of the joke, and it's not funny. But some people and a lot of people might be hurt by those comments and maybe have some low self-esteem from it, maybe feel bad, maybe not take it personally, maybe make a joke back, laugh about it. But somebody that has BDD is going to internalize that. Like, oh my gosh, they see that I'm that ugly. Like, there's proof that I am that ugly. Or, oh my gosh, is there something wrong with me? And then there becomes a hyper focus on those areas. And it can kind of go both ways, where there can be a lot of shame and minimizing those feelings, and that being pushed down and being overly pleasing, laughing when you don't want to laugh, not speaking up for yourself, not saying like, hey, that was hurtful, but feeling all that shame, but then saying, that's fine, oh, okay, or like walking away and crying, but not speaking up in the moment, or minimizing in those ways. But that can also be fuel for BDD, and that can shift and turn into an obsession, a compulsion. There can be that, either that anxious pleasing, or there can be that avoidant, now I'm retreating and I'm going to go punish myself because I feel so hideous and somebody just saw how hideous I was, or now something else has been pointed out and I need to fix it in order to be approved of. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
So referencing 10-ish-year-old Marissa, right? I don't think I was like, fuck you, like grandma, even though internally like, hey, like
ouch.
Why are you saying it in Spanish?
Yeah.
My cheeks are adorable. And C, also like, Dad, like, why did you have to repeat it?
Yeah.
But I'm sure I was more aware of my cheeks for a certain amount of time. Maybe I went and cried. Maybe I was nicer to my grandma to, I don't know, have her love me. But it wasn't an obsession. I didn't internalize it completely. I definitely was conscious of my cheeks throughout my adolescence. They're very unique, everybody. I got these puppy dog cheeks. Like, literally people called them that. And also, I was more conscious of other ways to please people, get people to like me other ways, other than
your appearance.
Right. And this perceived flaw.
Yeah.
So there's the distinction, or how others can contribute to the development of BDD, but also what differentiates codependency from and BDD.
There's definitely a spectrum. Like, ouch, that hurt, and I thought about it for a week, and it's not my main focus. To like, ouch, that hurt, like a stab wound, and I can't get rid of it, and now I have to fix this so that I'm lovable.
Yeah. Okay. Any other ways codependency and BDD are related, not related?
I almost think of, in the way that they're not related. I think I've talked about this a little bit earlier, that the person with BDD, it's almost like BDD is its own entity. And in the treatment of BDD, a lot of it is learning how BDD is just a part of you. Like, this is not all of you. But people can be in almost a codependent relationship with their BDD. And so when you think of codependence, at least when I think of codependence, I think of a relationship with the other person. Like, you're dependent on someone else or someone is dependent on you. And that can happen in BDD, where your partner or your friend or whoever is enabling your checking behaviors, your procedures, or all of that. But you can also be in a codependent relationship with your BDD. And that's where I also think it's a little bit different, because you end up putting the needs of BDD first, the needs and wants and attention that BDD wants from you. You could give all of your attention to what your BDD wants and not take care of yourself in any other way. And you think you're meeting your needs, but you're actually meeting the BDD's needs. And in separating from the BDD and recognizing it's an illness, and recognizing what it wants you to do is not, it's like an alcoholic, right? You have to drink, you have to, you need more alcohol to be okay. It's a lie. It's not true, but it feels true. And you can get caught up in that cycle of drinking to feel better. Same thing with BDD. You can get caught up in a cycle of procedures and mirror checking and thinking about your flaw and checking your flaw and asking people if they see your flaw and just constantly stuck in these obsessions and compulsions, and not recognizing that there are other parts of you that need your attention in order for you to be well. And you can get caught up in pleasing the BDD and go down a negative cycle on that path.
So for the listener, you're making me think of there's this form of therapy, narrative therapy, we externalize the problem.
Yep.
Right. And so as you're talking, there's Rachel as a young child, innocent, and noticing her flaws.
Yeah.
And then, right, so to externalize is to make something other, right? And you said this entity, which is this internal conflict you had between you and your BDD. What does BDD sound like? What did yours sound like?
So many things. I relate it to an abusive partner that's inside of yourself. And that abusive partner is BDD. And so there will be a part of you that says, like, I'm going to have a good day. It's going to be a good day. And then you look in the mirror and your BDD says, you're so ugly. You're so ugly. You're so hideous. How could you even leave the house? You're so ugly. You should die. You're so ugly. Like, just repetitively, over and over and over. You need to check this flaw. You can't leave the house without putting more makeup on. You can't leave the house wearing that. You can't leave the house with that body part showing. You can't go on dates. You can't, it's, no one's gonna really love you if they know these things about you. No way, it's just nonstop, and it shifts with different parts. Some people have a primary perceived flaw, but BDD can be sneaky and it can shift over the years. So you might make progress with one part of your body where you're, oh, I'm actually accepting this part, but we age and our bodies change, and now it might be skin discoloration or lines on your face, or you gain some weight, or your hair is changing, or gray hair, or whatever it is. And so there's always something that BDD will want to focus on usually. And it's very harsh, and it's pretty nonstop. The clients that I see with BDD, when I ask, how often do you hear these negative statements? They don't get a break. It's all day, every day. Sometimes it's in your dreams. It can be very intrusive and life-threatening at times.
Right.
Because there's a lot of suffering, and these are unwanted thoughts. This is, again, if I could repeat it a million times, it's not vanity. It's not, I think I'm amazing and I look amazing, so I'm going to go check and take selfies. People with BDD who are taking selfies will take hundreds of selfies just to see if they look normal. And this is not an easy thing to be going through for the people that are suffering from it. And it's usually really isolating. There's a lot of shame. And I think there are a lot of people out there with BDD that are just not diagnosed because it's not talked about often. And that's something I'm hoping to do more of as well, is just talk about it more. This is my first time in sharing more about my personal journey because there's been so much shame, and I'm hoping to also be a part of the other side that is helping to reduce that shame.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for doing that.
Of course.
Mm-hmm. All right. So we're hearing about the harshness, how one can really enter a codependent, right? Trying to please, appease, just stop that internal BDD voice. What strategies help people with BDD create healthier relationships? Yeah,
it's a great question. For me, first and foremost, you need to know you have BDD. So it's just getting educated. Like, what is BDD? Do I have BDD? There are scales out there online as well. You could see a therapist and see where you fall in the spectrum of just having body dysmorphic disorder and the severity of your specific symptoms and your BDD. The primary research right now around treatment with BDD is therapy, specifically cognitive behavioral therapy, in conjunction with something called exposure response prevention, and also possibly seeing a psychiatrist. So that combination of medication, working on your thinking patterns and what's going on in your mind, as well as challenging some of these behavioral obsessions and routines and breaking that up, is a part of the work. With cognitive behavioral therapy, you're really becoming aware of your faulty thinking patterns. And so recognizing and telling your therapist, like, this is how I think, these are the thoughts that go through my head, and your therapist trying to help piece away what is rational and matches your reality, what is like really healthy thinking, and what is maybe some distorted thinking patterns, some things that maybe you learned from your childhood, from those times where you were hurt by your appearance, or people said mean things to you, or you came to mistrust the world in certain ways, and maybe starting to question some of those thoughts. Like, oh, there might be another way that I can think about the world. We call that your core beliefs, your belief systems. So it's not just, I think I'm ugly, and then starting to think, oh, you might not be so ugly. It's not that easy. It's a pretty lengthy process. Doesn't have to be too long, but it takes some time to just show up and be honest about, this is how I think. And then to hear that some of that thinking might be causing more harm. There's other ways that you can be thinking. Like with BDD, a lot of people make assumptions when they're walking down the street. That person sees how hideous my nose is. That person is judging me. Those assumptions just probably aren't true, honestly.
Right.
And even if somebody did look at your appearance, they're probably not even looking at your perceived flaw or judging you in the same way you think they're judging you. And so it's starting to step back and realize that when we make those assumptions, that's causing a lot of harm. And takes a toll on how we see others, how we think others see us, and how we perceive ourselves in the world.
Right.
Exposure response prevention is so important with BDD, because that's actually changing those patterns and routines. Things like spending 5 hours in the mirror is not healthy behavior. And so trying to get that down to healthy mirror hygiene. Sometimes the therapist, a therapist that specializes in BDD might actually be in the home with you, helping you cut back on certain routines, because this is not easy stuff. You're going to be challenging a lot of that discomfort. Your BDD is not going to want to change these behaviors. And so this takes a lot of support and coaching and going slowly, not just changing all of your routines, but just cutting back in little areas. And that's why it really should be done with the therapist, because this is challenging stuff. But really getting better with BDD, ideally you're going to want to be doing those exposures, which basically say, when I do the uncomfortable thing and I sit with that anxiety will actually go down if I don't go to my reassurance seeking behavior. And I stick with the healthy behavior. I might be anxious for an hour, but that anxiety will go down. And so with the support of a therapist, they can help you with those exposures so that you can work on experiencing anxiety and experiencing it going down. And the more you don't engage in those reassurance seeking behaviors or routines, it gets easier over time to do them less, to cut down the time, to ultimately possibly not doing them at all and having more control over your own life again.
Right. This is a stretch, but as you're talking, I'm like, oh my God, this is what I experience, right? Healing from my codependency. I can read all the books and go to all the therapy sessions, but if someone says, hey, Marissa, do you want to do this thing that I don't want to do and I'd rather have you do it, and be like, no. And then like go to the bathroom and cry and worry that they're never going to want to talk to me again, right? But sitting with the anxiety, it's exposure.
It is exposure. And yes, you're doing it every day, or all the different areas too. With BDD, it's its own specialty, but these are helpful behaviors to engage in for anyone.
Right.
And especially with codependency as well.
And then too, if someone with BDD is codependent with their BDD internally, that conflict, you know, those are boundaries. Those are saying no, like I'm not going to please you anymore.
Yep. A lot of boundaries with yourself, with your BDD.
Independence.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Were you going to add something? Yeah.
Something I just wanted to quickly add before we switch to the next. Something that I think is missing from treatment with BDD is self-compassion work. And it's not something that is typically talked about. It's usually CBT, exposure response prevention, medication. It ends there. In my recovery, and then also in supporting other people with BDD, there's such a relational component. Like we talked about before, that early attachment stuff is present. There's an unhealthy relationship with others sometimes, and there's also an unhealthy relationship with yourself. And a huge part of BDD is self-hatred. It's disgust with your appearance, it's harsh. And self-compassion work is that combination of mindfulness, what they call common humanity, which is thinking of others. So you're getting outside of yourself, thinking of others, and then also self-kindness. And it's a combination of those three components. And practicing self-compassion is like muscles that you don't have yet. And you don't not work out because you're not getting the muscles yet. You keep working out. And eventually you're like, oh my gosh, I have some muscles. Like, oh, look at that definition. Go me. It's similar with self-compassion work. As we practice self-compassion, not to just feel better after we practice it. We practice it because we deserve self-compassion. And we need self-compassion to have less anxiety, less depression, more self-confidence, more self-kindness. It can help regulate our physical bodies. And so a lot of the work that I also do with clients is understanding how to practice self-compassion and integrating that into daily practices as well.
And the tenets are mindfulness, humanity.
Common humanity. So thinking of others, it's like thinking of your friends or your family, other people in the world and what other people go through, or just being grateful. One of my favorite ones is when you're eating, just being grateful for everyone that was a part of making that food so that you could have that food. And taking into account there's also more than just you. There are others, and you're not alone in the struggle of life. Like BDD, and I'm sure codependency and other mental illnesses can feel so isolated. No one feels what I feel. No one understands this. And the reality is you are not alone. And when we can tap into remembering that I'm actually not alone, it can help be soothing and supportive in a lot of different ways.
And the third?
Self-kindness.
Self-kindness. We're going to have you back to talk about self-compassion.
Yes. The biggest question with self-compassion that is different from mindfulness. Mindfulness is, what am I aware of? What do I see? And self-compassion says, what do I need? What do I need to feel safe? What do I need to feel soothed? What do I need to take care of myself right now?
I think I want you to talk about that for a whole hour.
Yes.
So, yeah, we'll definitely have you back.
Come back to that.
And you have a support group.
I do have a support group. Yes.
How does that, right? Speaking of isolation, loneliness, feeling like you're the only one and only, with BDD or codependency.
Yes.
How do you sense that helps address BDD and codependency?
Yeah. Well, I'm really excited about this group, and I'm loving running the group so far. Biggest thing is BDD. Again, most people are just going through it alone. There are also really not a lot of resources out there for group support with BDD. The biggest part of healing is getting out of isolation, not being alone. And a lot of the treatments are one-on-one therapies. A lot of therapists don't even really know about BDD or don't specialize in BDD. Most people don't really, most people don't really get it. And 20 years later into my just working on my own treatment with BDD, there still isn't a lot out there. And so I feel for people. So I've been wanting to create a community where it's specifically for adults. I'm looking to create another group for adolescents as well. But right now it's just for adults. It's a co-ed group where individuals who are diagnosed or living with body dysmorphic disorder get to come together and have both group support. So just being seen is an exposure. So turning on your computer video and being on the screen, being seen, sharing specifically what it is that you're going through, receiving support and feedback from others, also receiving therapeutic and clinical feedback. So it's a bit of peer support where you're being seen and heard and understood, supporting others and realizing you're not in this alone. And then also having a component of intervention and therapy discussion of what can you do specifically wherever you're at with your BDD to reduce some of your symptoms. We meet every other week, and during that time outside of therapy, people are working on their treatment and coming back and having that accountability of what it is that they're doing to focus on healing. And wherever it is that they're having struggles with, if they kind of regressed and struggled with mirror checking, or they were comparing themselves to people online, or they were crying or felt unlovable, whatever the experience, and the wins. So we have check-ins where we report any wins that you had with your BDD as well as the struggles, so that we're working on practicing that balance and not just focusing on the negative, but recognizing what you are doing, even if you're not completely on the other side yet, that any win should be acknowledged, that you're trying. And it's been beautiful. And we do end with a self-compassion exercise as well, so that self-compassion work is practiced and facilitated so people can feel what that's like to practice self-compassion, even if they're not feeling super self-compassionate at the time.
Right. So being in a group, a healthy group, a boundaried group, a professionally led group, since those all help combat if someone has BDD and codependency, right? Two birds, one stone. Any
Boundaries
other ways?
Is a big one.
Any other ways you sense, right? A group environment helps combat codependency. Or this group environment, not a group environment.
What I recognize is really supportive. Different people are in different places with their healing. And some people are more in that codependency spectrum of self-sacrificing. They don't feel worthy and they feel unlovable, and they're reporting that and they're sharing where they're at. And other people are in a different part of that spectrum where they've gotten out of a toxic relationship, or they're recognizing that they're worthy, and they're able to reflect that back of, hey, I've been where you're at, and this is possible for you, and this is what I believe is possible for me. And it's really inspiring to see people on all those different spectrums and to recognize what is possible. Yes, the struggle and the stuckness is real, but it's also to see that this is where I am right now, but I can actually move into a different space, and not just listening to someone else being like, great, that's nice, but also getting specific feedback on how to maybe think and behave and move into what's healthier for you, and get support around that, so that it doesn't feel like you're reading a self-help book and closing in, going right back to your struggles with no support at all.
Right. Those books help to an extent.
To an extent. Real life connection. well, especially with the pandemic. And yes, this is an online group, and possibly in the future I'll be doing more in-person work, but any connection is so much better than nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are some of my goals with this group specifically, is to really help people to not have to be alone. And group can be used as an individual modality, or it can be used, if you also have your own therapist, you can use the group as just an additional support.
Right. Individual modality is just a fancy way to say you can do this by itself,
yeah.
or this plus therapy coaching.
Yep. You could do it alone, or you can do it with therapy.
Got it.
Or coaching, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for that and sharing on it. We will definitely have to talk more about self-compassion.
I would love to.
And yeah, I'm hearing how you have healed, and I also want to hear more. So we'll have you back. But till then,
yes.
What are you offering the listener today?
Well, I am offering the listener, if you are looking for any individual work and you would like to discuss possibly working with me for your initial session, I'm offering an $80 off discount.
Damn!
For your listeners. This is actually the first time I'm doing a discount of my services, but I am so passionate about this work, and I would love to support any of your listeners that are struggling with codependency, BDD, body image. The struggle is real. I see you, I understand you, and if you think that we could be a good fit working together, I would love to support you and give you that discount for your initial session.
Yes. And go ahead.
I was going to say that's an hour-long session for those that wonder.
60 minutes. 50 minutes, everybody.
I do a 60-minute, believe it or not, but yes.
Yeah. And where can people find you?
So my website is www.rachelktherapy.com. And you can also email me at rachel@rachelktherapy.com.
Awesome. So put that in the show notes. Also, I'll get a link for the BDD group.
Yes.
Yes,
I'll put a link. And I'm licensed in California and also in Illinois. So anyone of your listeners, if they're located anywhere in California or Illinois, I'm able to support you. If you're out in different states, please call me, because of COVID, there's some differences, like for the group specifically. If you're interested, let me know. If not, I can also refer you to someone maybe in your area that could be supportive or helpful. But California and Illinois, those are my two states for now.
There you go. Where my older sister went to her higher education.
Oh,
both states.
Nice.
All right. Well, thank you, Rachel, so
you're
much.
So welcome, Marissa. Thank you so much for having me. And I really hope that your listeners, those that connect with this, realize they're not alone and there is help available.
Mm-hmm. I hope they realize that too.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye, everybody. Hey, girl. It's Marissa again. I'm not like a regular podcaster. I'm a cool podcaster, right? Thank you for listening and staying till the end. You can find me on Instagram at Therapy with Marissa. Email me, marissa@codependummy.com. Check out codependummy.com for more information on the show. And baby girl, a subscribe, rating, and review would be much appreciated. Till next time, I want you to remember, if you are feeling unseen, I see you. If you are feeling unheard, I hear you. And if you think that you don't matter, know that you matter to me. I want you to go out there so you can stop playing small and start taking up space, you dummy. And now, the disclaimer. Girl, this is not therapy, and I am not your therapist. This podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regards to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, publisher, or guests are rendering any legal, clinical, or other professional service. If you want or need a professional, please find one.